In the summer of 1941, Nazi Germany launched the largest military invasion in human history. Millions of German soldiers crossed into the Soviet Union under Operation Barbarossa. Thousands of tanks rolled across open fields. Aircraft filled the skies. Entire Soviet armies collapsed under the speed and violence of the German advance. To the world, it appeared unstoppable. German commanders expected victory within months. But deep behind the front lines, another battle had already begun. A battle not fought with bullets or tanks, but with fuel, food, railroads, spare parts, and supply lines. Because wars are not won by attack alone. They are sustained by logistics. And on the Eastern Front, Germany's logistics system slowly began to collapse. Operation Barbarossa was unlike anything Germany had attempted before. More than 3 million Axis troops were committed to the invasion. The offensive stretched across a front nearly 2,000 miles long. Army Group North pushed toward Leningrad. Army Group Center drove toward Moscow. Army Group South advanced into Ukraine. At first, German forces achieved massive encirclements. Soviet divisions were trapped and destroyed in huge numbers. But every kilometer eastward created a new problem: distance. The Soviet Union was enormous. German supply lines became longer and more fragile with each advance. Fuel trucks traveled hundreds of miles over damaged roads. Ammunition had to move constantly to keep the offensive alive. Food, medical supplies, winter clothing, replacement parts, everything depended on transportation. And transportation quickly became Germany's greatest weakness. One of the biggest logistical disasters involved railways. German planners expected to capture and use Soviet rail systems to move supplies eastward. But Soviet railroads used a different track gauge than European railways. German trains literally could not operate on Soviet tracks. Entire rail lines had to be rebuilt as the army advanced. This process took time, manpower, and equipment Germany could not spare. Meanwhile, retreating Soviet forces destroyed bridges, rail stations, and infrastructure behind them. The deeper German forces moved into Soviet territory, the more difficult resupply became. Frontline units often advanced faster than supplies could reach them. Tanks sat idle without fuel. Artillery units ran low on ammunition. Mechanized divisions became increasingly dependent on horse-drawn transport. Despite Germany's image as a fully modern military force, much of the Wehrmacht still relied heavily on horses for logistics, and horses could not sustain a modern mechanized war across massive distances.
Not the battle-trained German army, but
fuel shortages became a constant crisis. German armored warfare depended on speed and mobility, but tanks, trucks, and aircraft consumed enormous amounts of fuel every day. As supply routes stretched farther east, fuel deliveries became slower and more unreliable. The Soviet Union's poor road network made conditions even worse. Many roads were unpaved. During dry weather, vehicles choked in thick dust. During rain, entire roads turned into deep mud. This seasonal mud period, known as the Rasputitsa, crippled German movement. Trucks broke down constantly. Engines failed. Tires wore out faster than replacements could arrive. German industry struggled to replace damaged vehicles quickly enough. By late 1941, mechanical attrition had become devastating. Many German divisions were operating far below strength, not because of combat losses alone, but because the logistics system could no longer support the pace of the offensive. German planners expected the Soviet Union to collapse before winter. They were wrong. As temperatures dropped, German troops found themselves dangerously unprepared. Winter uniforms had not been distributed in sufficient numbers. Lubricants froze inside weapons and engines. Vehicles failed in extreme cold. Soldiers suffered frostbite and exhaustion. Supply shortages became even more severe as weather conditions worsened. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union continued mobilizing reserves from deeper inside the country. Fresh Soviet divisions arrived near Moscow, while German forces weakened from cold, fatigue, and lack of supplies. The offensive that was supposed to destroy the Soviet Union had stalled outside the Soviet capital, and logistics played a major role in that failure. The logistical crisis was made worse by strategic decisions from Adolf Hitler himself. German priorities constantly shifted. One moment, the focus was Moscow, then Ukraine, then Leningrad. These changing objectives created confusion across the supply network. Resources were repeatedly redirected between army groups. Fuel and equipment were moved inefficiently across massive distances. At the same time, Hitler underestimated Soviet industrial resilience. Entire Soviet factories were dismantled and relocated east of the Ural Mountains, beyond German reach. Despite enormous losses, Soviet production continued growing. Germany, meanwhile, struggled to replace its own losses while fighting a prolonged war it had never fully prepared to sustain. By 1942, Germany faced a growing reality. The war in the East was no longer a rapid campaign. It had become a war of attrition, and attrition favored the Soviet Union. The Soviets could trade territory for time. Germany could not. Every destroyed tank, every broken truck, every lost locomotive became harder to replace. German logistics networks became increasingly overstretched and vulnerable. Partisan attacks behind the lines disrupted railroads and supply convoys. Air attacks targeted transport infrastructure. The farther Germany advanced, the weaker its logistical foundation became. Eventually, the offensive power that had shocked Europe in 1941 could no longer be sustained.
Germany did not fail on the Eastern Front because its soldiers lacked skill or determination. It failed because modern war depends on more than battlefield victories. Armies require fuel, food, transportation, maintenance, replacement equipment, and above all, sustainable logistics. Operation Barbarossa began as a lightning war, but it became a brutal struggle against distance, weather, infrastructure, and industrial capacity. Behind every German advance stood a logistical system slowly collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. And in the end, that collapse helped decide the outcome of World War II. Don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe.